So, unpopular opinion, but I absolutely love centers or stations in my classroom. In fact, it's one of my favorite times of the day. What I love about it is I'm able to differentiate instruction to meet the needs of my students. Whether it's in the centers themselves, I might have students working on different skills depending on their specific sets and gaps of learning, or when I pull them back for small groups and I can really target the gaps in knowledge or pre-teach lessons. It seems like that's the best way I have found to make the most growth for my students. And so I really enjoy this time because, again, it's where I see my students make the most growth in their learning. Personally, it's easier for me to adapt and individualize each student and what they're experiencing. And I also get to see the growth, which as a teacher, that's one of the things that we're most obsessed with. But one thing I love more is that I can work with students independently without being interrupted. So, this is part three of a series all about centers. So, the first week we talked about how to plan and prep centers to run independently without you. The second week, or last week, we talked about how to get students to run centers themselves through accountability. Well, this week we're going to be talking about how to get your students to transition from one center to another without you. So, with that being said, let's dive in.
Hey teacher bestie, my name's Helena and I'm the creator of the Present Teacher Podcast. I'm a first year teacher coach, and in this podcast you are going to learn everything from simple, actionable classroom management, social emotional learning, and teacher wellness strategies. You know that impact you want to make in the classroom? Well, we're going to make it happen here.
So the first thing we're going to dive into to get your students to transition from center to center without you is classroom jobs. Now, classroom jobs is something we kind of touched on week two, but part two, I'm going to dive deeper into that today. So I rely on classroom jobs to have students transition without me. This makes it possible for me to sit at the back table, work on it with a student one-on-one, and not worry if time runs over the 15 minutes or however long my centers are. I can keep going and keep teaching while my students transition from one activity to another. And again, I rely on these with classroom jobs. Now, I have a specific system I use for classroom jobs, and I actually have resources in my TPT store that are classroom jobs, so you can see the job descriptions, my job applications, and my whole process for them. So if you kind of want to see further on what classroom jobs might look like in my classroom, definitely go check that out. Or even if you just want inspiration on something that you could have in your classroom, again, full permission to go check that out. But here are the different classroom jobs that I specifically use during this time for centers for transitioning. So the first thing is a timekeeper. So my timekeeper is in charge of setting the timer for each transition. So remember in week one or part one, we talked about how we had to set a lot of time for each rotation. Sometimes that's 10 minutes, sometimes that's 12 minutes, 15 minutes, however long that may be. Well, my timekeeper is in charge of setting that timer, and then once we transition centers, starting that timer again. So the next person that I use, or classroom job I use during centers to have my students run without me, is a teacher helper. So the teacher helper plays the music, pauses the music, and gets the students to transition from one activity to another. And we're going to talk more about this in a second. But I've also used in the past a DJ, and the DJ has been in charge of the playing the music and pausing the music that students transition to. Either way, having somebody in charge of that. The next person or job I use when it comes to transitioning centers are group leaders. So, group leaders are the first person someone asks for help with. Instead of going to the teacher helper for help or me for help and interrupting me teaching or working with students, each group or each center has a group leader. Anybody in that group can ask the group leader for help. If the group leader doesn't know the answer, that group leader then goes to the teacher helper. The teacher helper will then help the group leader, and the group leader will then tell the student. If the teacher helper doesn't know, then the teacher helper comes and asks me if needed, and I will answer, and then they can go tell whoever they need to. And the fourth and final classroom job I use during this time is a work tracker. So, a work tracker is someone who's in charge of checking off work during centers on a clipboard if it's not turned in or done for me, or essentially. So, an example could be they get a plus if they've done it, they give a minus if they don't do it, and then they get a plus slash minus if it's halfway done. Maybe they get a smiley face if it's all done and done correctly. They get a frowny face if it's not done at all or incorrectly. And then they might get a middle face with a straight line if it's medium or half done. So, having that done, so I'm not having to stop my teaching or whoever I'm helping at the back table, and I can just look at the checkboard and see who was working and who wasn't is really helpful when it comes to collecting work and grading and all that jazz. So we talked about classroom jobs, and that's the first thing that I do to have my students transition from one activity to another without me. But let's talk about switching centers and during the transition and how I specifically do it. So, the first thing I do is I choose a song to transition to. So, for example, this could be something that my students love, like a show or instrumental to a popular song. When Frozen 2 came out, we played that. Moana 2, we picked a song from that. I like to use the Cupid or the Kids Bop Shuffle, and my students and I actually Kids Bop Shuffle from one center to another. You can be as silly or serious as you want, but doing something like that, or even doing like if you're secondary or an upper elementary, having the instrumental, I like to use piano guys for the songs, the popular songs that my kids are listening to. That way I don't have to get worried about lyrics, is something that could be popular too. So that's the first step. First thing is to choose a song. After that, you're going to pair the song with the classroom procedure slide. And I've talked about classroom procedure slides a lot on this channel where you're tuning in from. But classroom procedure slides are exactly how I teach classroom procedures. They're already done in my TPT store, so if you want to check that out, in the classroom procedure slides, I do have transitioning centers as one of them. And we talk about what it should and shouldn't look like, what it should and should not sound like, and it's already done for you, your own preferences. So if you want an idea what that looks like, definitely go check that out. But essentially what happens is I start the music, and when I start the music, my students are then in charge of cleaning up the center. And I model which part of the song should be done at which point. So when I teach the classroom procedure, okay, boys and girls, or okay, class, today we're going to work on transitioning centers. So I'm going to act like a student. I'm going to have my timekeeper and my DJ play the music, and they're gonna show me what it should look like or help me, and I'm gonna show you what it should look like until my teacher helper or my DJ starts the music. I'm cleaning up, and then I'm going to physically get up and model which part I should be switching to the next setter. And then we're gonna discuss what that should look like and sound like. And then after we have that discussion, I'm gonna say, okay, class, now I'm gonna show you what it shouldn't look like and sound like. Teacher helper, go and play the music, and then I'm gonna goof off. I'm gonna do everything wrong. I'm not gonna switch when the part that I'm supposed to switch at. I'm not gonna clean up all the way. I'm gonna leave my chair pushed out. And then we're gonna have a discussion on why that's not the right way, or why that it shouldn't look or sound that way, and why it's important to do it the right way. After that, my class is going to practice until it becomes a habit to do it the right way. Quick tip for this, I like to have my students transition the same direction every single time. So, for example, I have a Harry Potter classroom. So, let's say I have Ravenclaw, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Slytherin. Every time each color is gonna go this way. So we always go this way. So we're gonna practice that. And again, when I introduce the centers and we play the song and we practice this, we're gonna practice the direction that we're gonna go. And if at any point we go the wrong direction, something's not right, then we're gonna go back and do it again. So we're practicing it until it becomes a habit because at that point, once my students can do it automatically without thinking about it, then I can go back to the back table and teach my small group and I can trust them to do whatever they got to do. So after that, let's talk about how my students run it. So once we practice transitioning to music, this is how a typical transition goes if I were to transition from one center to another. So the first step, the teacher helper or the DJ starts the song to clean up and transition to. So we'll say timer goes off, teacher helper goes, pauses the timer, the timekeeper goes and pauses the timer so it's not dinging anymore. And then the teacher helper, the DJ, automatically pushes play to the song to transition. Typically, they'll be on a slide ready to go, or they'll be pulled up for my students, my teacher, helper, or DJ ready to go. So at this point, my students are cleaning up, and then a specific point in the song, like the chorus plays, and that's when they're trained to then transition from one center to another. So at that point, my teacher helper is going to go up, pause the song, and they have a choice to make. Did we do it how to the level of expectation that the teacher has? If so, then we continue on and we do our activity. If not, then the teacher helper or the DJ has every right to say remix or do it again or we need to practice again. I love how blank, blank, and blank did this, but we have some of the class did this. Let's do it again. So then they can have them go back and do it again until the whole class does it correctly. After that, let's say we've done it correctly this time. My timekeeper is going to go up, starts the timer for the next set of time for center. So let's say it's 15 minutes. They're going to go set the timer for 15 minutes. My students get to work. During this time, if any of the kids have questions, they're going to go to their group leaders. If the group leader doesn't know, they're going to check in with the teacher helper. If the teacher helper doesn't know, then the teacher helper is going to come ask me. And during this time, the work checker, whenever someone's done, they're going to monitor how work is going during the centers. They're going to give people smiley faces, frowny faces, or mid faces, or plus, minus, or a check, whatever the system may be. And then the system repeats itself for the next center. So let's say the timer goes off, the timekeeper is going to pause the timer. Then my teacher helper or DJ is going to play the music for us to transition. And if it's done correctly, then they're going to pause the music and we're going to continue on with their center. If it's not, then they could say remix or do it again. And then they have to do it again and go back to the center they were just at and practice that transition until they do it correctly. So it's just one thing that keeps repeating as many times or as many rotations as we have for that day. Meanwhile, during this time, I'm at the back table teaching small groups. So I don't have to worry about if one group took longer than the other. I can take as long as I need, and I don't have to worry about transitioning the entire class because my students don't need me. They can do it without me. So that wraps up how transitions during centers goes in my class. So as a recap, we have classroom jobs. We talked about which classroom jobs I use in order to transition centers. And then we talked about switching centers with music, how I use music as a cue to get my students from one point to another. If you found this helpful and you want more classroom management tips, I recommend making sure to follow or subscribe wherever you're tuning in from so you can get more tips like this on different strategies to help your classroom run smoothly without you. If you want to take it a step further, definitely recommend checking out my classroom management guide. It answers the top 10 questions I get in regards to classroom management, plus it links to additional podcasts and YouTube videos. So it's all in one place so you don't have to shift through all of my content now on that topic. If you want to take it a step further and you want all the resources I use to run my classroom, definitely check out the Classroom Management Bundle. What I like about this bundle is the templates are done for you, they're editable, and you can literally take plug and play what I'm using, and there's 5 different themes. So if you change your theme from year to year and you're someone who likes to have a cohesive theme, there's 5 different themes in there, so hopefully one of them is close to your theme so you can use them. And what I like about that is a bonus that you get is you get access to a 15-day challenge by tuning in or grabbing that bundle. So make sure to check that out. If there's individual templates you like in that bundle, pay it on the enrollment page. I did link to my TPT store where you can access individual templates. So make sure to check that out, even if you just want ideas on what it could look like in your classroom. If you want to take it a step further and you want the strategy behind everything, definitely check out the Present Teacher Circle. The Present Teacher Circle is my community where I help new and first year teachers automate their classroom and eliminate the overwhelm and burnout that most teachers often face their first few years. We talk about everything from classroom management all the way to planning and prepping weeks ahead. I mean, we talk about grading, communication, organization. I mean, you name it, grade, like it's all there. So you can pick and choose which topics you want to cover. There's challenges in there. There's templates in there. There's all sorts of things. So definitely go check that out. That wraps up everything. I hope you found this helpful. Let me know. Are you going to be using music to transition your centers? Let me know in the comments or send me a DM. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, remember we are stronger together, and I'll see you in the next one, Teacher Bestie. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I hope that you were able to take away some value that will help you thrive inside and out of the classroom. It would mean the world to me if you could take 5 seconds right now and leave a review on this podcast. And if you found this podcast especially helpful, make sure to take a screenshot of this episode right now and tag me on your socials to let me know you're listening. As always, remember that we are stronger together with all the love in the world. Helena, aka the Present Teacher. See you next time, Teacher Bestie.